Hey, Will Jones.
What's going on, Yodit? And hello to all of our friends who may be watching this little vlog between the two of us today. Hope y'all are
We
doing
hope you're
well.
watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Will, passing the torch.
Here we are. Um, um, 4 weeks, 3 weeks out from a big transition. It's pretty
Yeah,
wild.
25 days. 25
Yeah.
days, 3 hours, 47. No, stop.
Don't we do not do me like that. That is we don't need to get that accurate.
I'm
Nobody at
just
home
teasing.
needs to be
It's on
counting
my
the minutes
mind because
either.
Tyson was counting down sophomore year, which ended
Oh, really?
today. So,
That's
yeah,
wild. Oh my
we've both had a
gosh.
little bit of, what do they call it? Kind of senioritis, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, he hasn't earned it nearly as much as you have, so he still has a ways to go, sophomore year. All right.
That's another
I love it.
conversation for another day.
Yeah. A
But you
completely
and
different
I had
vlog.
agreed that it might be. Well, it's in keeping with tradition, at least for the last few years, that
Yeah.
as leaders are heading out anew, that we take a moment to reflect on that. And this is a big transition.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I think, obviously the timing of it is, intentional, right? We're wrapping up a fiscal year at new and about to begin another one. So uh one chapter closes, another chapter begins. But I think it's also been pretty customary for us to like take a look back and do some
Mhm.
reflection on some things as well as we kind of wrap up a year. So excited to provide a little bit of space for us to do that as well, and talk about how all of this came to be.
Yeah, I mean, really, we were imagining this as a space to kind of lift up the hood on our succession planning and on transition. And I think for me also to just have a little record of what feels
Mm,
like a virtual or digital record of
yeah,
what feels like the culmination of a lot of planning, a lot of conversations, a lot of development over the years. So let's get into it. Let's get
let's do
into
it.
it.
Let's
So
do it.
for those
Why?
who are like, what are
Yeah,
they talking about?
right.
On June 30th of 2025, I am stepping down as CEO after 17 years with New and 5 years as CEO. Um, and as part of our succession planning, you are our incoming CEO.
Yeah,
Hmm.
3 weeks.
I can't help, Will, but to think about, you've heard this story before, but I want others to know because I want to honor intuition in leadership, which is not a skill or an attribute or a competency that we often lift up or put on job descriptions. But I will say that I believe it was myself, Mike Tyson, who was our CEO at the time, and I want to say Lolita. Was
Mm,
Lolita in that interview with you? But the office that is now our finance office used to be our cozy room, and you were sitting on this orange leather couch. And from what I recall, it was like almost at the moment that you opened your mouth, I was like, oh, yeah, he needs to be here. And I think it was those qualities are what I still feel now are what new needs. You can talk more about your evolution here, but um, you have a way of connecting with people that is genuine and authentic, and it's not haughty. You're very approachable. You have a warmth about you and a way of listening deeply. In fact, you're one of the best listeners I know. And so just right away, I had a full body yes. I don't care if we had to, and we were trying to figure out what the role was, but I just have watched over the last 7 years those qualities, your ability to listen deeply, your ability to um, be open to new ideas, new ways of imagining things that new, to, I know this word is overused, but to be adaptive and nimble. And I recognize those as really important qualities and attributes for leadership, particularly leadership now and in this moment.
I feel like that was some very kind words that you just shared about me, and so I want to say thank you for that. Um, and yeah, I mean, it has been a tremendous journey, and this is a point. If you had told the me, 8 years ago that this is where I would be, there, I would have just laughed in your face. There's no way, right? Um, because yeah, when I came to New, first of all, just to remind everybody who maybe hasn't heard, uh, I applied for a position here and did not get it. I was in business school earning my MBA at Eastern, and I'm learning about organizations that really are like social enterprises, right? And New was part of the curriculum. And so I looked into the org, not knowing at the time that my godfather was the CEO, because you know how you grow up and your aunts and uncles are adults and they have jobs and you don't know what they are. You just know that they do stuff. So that was a beautiful surprise. And then nepotism failed me. And and I applied for a position and was politely declined with, grace and love. But
Mhm.
then another position opened up about 4 or 5 months later, and it was my mom who was like, honey, I know that the first one didn't work out, but maybe this is a better fit. Um,
Mhm.
and so the opportunity to come into that meeting, and I think it actually might have been Ann Agler who was in that
Mhm.
interview.
Mhm.
Um, in what is now, the finance office, and just being struck myself by the fact that here I was, having this conversation with two women who have, are much more experienced in the field, and that it felt like you all were like listening and taking me as seriously as I was trying to take you and show up
Yeah.
there, and that level of respect was something that was just immediately was like, ooh, because I don't know, in my 20s, like many folks, I had some jobs that weren't so great,
Yeah.
worked for some folks that did not value me as a human,
Yeah.
and only kind of saw the value, the financial value that I could provide for them.
That's right.
So to come into a new space and, oh wow, this is a refreshing change of pace, even off the
Yeah.
rip. But I think all of the things that have said you've seen in me, I have been, not only your employee, but a student of yours
Mhm.
for the past 7 years, right? I have had the unique privilege of directly reporting to you in my entire career at New. I don't think there's anybody else that can say that. And so that's something that I've just been appreciating with
Yeah.
a different perspective over the past several months. Um, but that adaptability, I mean, you are somebody who perpetually has their ear to the ground in whatever ways you can, takes the truths and realities of our friends and peers and colleagues very seriously, and says, okay, if that is fact, and somebody's telling me there's trust there, then what they're telling me
Mhm.
is real. So if that is fact, what does that mean for us, and how can we change and not be boxed in? um the way of connecting with folks, I can't tell you, I don't have to tell the folks on who are going to watch this how many times I've been in spaces where somebody has said, oh, I'm here because Yodi invited me and I will do anything that Yodi asked me to, right? And
Mm.
people don't do that for people that they fear
Yeah.
or, don't respect, or are just trying to brown nose. Like they show up for things after hours because they trust, care, love, believe in you,
Yeah.
and the relationships that you all have built together. So all of, yes, I have been I'm grateful for all of the things that you named about, you
Yeah.
know, what you have seen in me. And so much of that has been nurtured and cultivated here at New.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's why it's like such a beautiful privilege to have the
Yeah.
opportunity to, uh, take the helm after you and continue, I'm going to mix metaphors now. Uh, I was saying take the helm because I always, but when you and I are talking about work, I often talk about it like a ship, but we're passing the torch. So I'm going to let the flame, continue to give it life,
Yeah.
continue to breathe life into it.
Yeah. There's a few things you said that I want to tap on a little bit. So when you were talking about the interview, and it was Ann Agler, and it's great that you mentioned Ann because Ann was the first person who sort of helped me understand the way she was in an administrative role,
Hmm.
and she talked about how we take administrative roles for granted. And she was the first person to like technically introduce me to change management. She'd come out of Zingerman's, where that's a big part of their culture. So two things she taught me with change management. One, and it had to do with like I think we were getting a new copier, and we were having a conversation about the contract. We weren't thinking about the actual copier, and she was like, "Yodit, if y'all are going to move that copier, it would be helpful if you involved me and other people who use the copier regularly." And that launched us into a conversation about how really disrespectful we often are of the folks who are really the glue and the engine of our organizations that carry administrative labor. And you know how you hear something and it changes you like instantly? That wisdom that she shared with me, probably, I don't know, at this point, 12 years ago, was really instrumental in what you were experiencing, which was uh, also about how are we treating people who take their time, their energy, their gifts and talents and decide to come to our organizations, right? So part of what your experience in that interview was is that before I was CEO, I was COO, thanks to your godfather, who was also a mentor of mine. Shout out to Michael Tyson, who was CEO from about 2010 until 2019. And Mike gave me a lot of room, and he knew his strengths and he knew where his growth edges were. And so we were really complementary to one another in that way. But Michael also wasn't, I don't think, I mean, other than he could get dressed up and he could look real good, but mostly Mike would show up to work in jeans and some Timbos. And that meant that if he had to take the trash out, he would. If it meant he had to climb up on the roof, he would. If it meant sitting in a meeting or meeting a tenant. And so folks like him and Anne and others, I mean, there's a legacy of people who have left an impression on me at New, but they really seeded this idea of being a human centered or a people centered organization. And so what you were experiencing in that interview actually was our beginning to practice a new way of engaging folks that would work at New. And that is, I hope, one of the legacies that you'll continue because I think, like you, I had had some really shitty work experiences where I felt extracted from, where I felt like, I was nothing more than a number, where I wasn't, paid well or wasn't treated well or wasn't talked to well. And I didn't have the power to do anything about that because my livelihood was tied up in it. And so, even some of the growth edges New had, right, that I experienced kind of early on coming into the organization. You know how you make that mental note, like, if I ever get a chance, I'm
Oh yeah, come
going to
on.
do this thing differently. And so I think that just the third and final thing I want to say is that, there's debates around, when a senior leadership role opens up, do you hire from within or do you bring folks in from the outside? And in my nearly 25 years in the field, Will, I've seen a lot of organizations have significant disruption when that transition happens with someone from the outside. I've also seen it go really well, but you happened to come in, and I was maturing in leadership at a time where I was also learning a lot about ageism in the nonprofit sector. And I identify as a Gen Xer, and I had experienced myself this kind of resistance from generations older than me who kind of set up this paradigm of like, we made our way here and you need to figure out how to get yourself here. Again, not everybody, Michael being an exception, but a
Mm,
lot of folks, that was the sentiment. And it didn't show up as aggression. It just was like they wouldn't give you the keys to the castle, or they wouldn't give you
mhm.
the tips or the tricks to navigate um, ascending in your career. And I just promised that I wouldn't do that. Um, and especially as I learn more about the age of leaders in the nonprofit sector. I mean, at one point, early on in the mid 2000s, 80% of nonprofit boards were white men over the age of 60, like majority white dudes over the age of 60. And CEOs skewed much older as well. And there is something that comes with maturation and reps and all of that. But
Mhm.
there's also something missed by not having folks who have a different orientation or a different perspective on life, on the world, on work. And a quick anecdote about that is soon after you started, you and others in your age group had a different boundary around work than I did. And I've joked with you about this. The first few times, like 5 o'clock, you were packing your stuff up and walking out the door. I'm like, where are they going? And y'all were like, work is over. Oh,
Mhm.
so you've been a teacher to me in that way as well, in terms of setting boundaries and, really drawing a line between what's work and what's family, what's pleasure, what's not work. Um, I appreciated learning that from you, albeit a little bit resentful initially.
Listen, we do what we have to do in order to make sure we come back the next day, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important there. But I think, one of the things that we have also done, which has been refreshing, I think, in the 7 years that I've been at New is, like you were saying, we've continued to move into, this ethos as a human-centered, a people-centered organization, right? And so, yes, I think as a person who identifies as a core millennial, 1990 baby, we that work-life boundary is a thing. But it also, I think we aspire to a world where it is not as hard of a line in a lot of ways, right? Because particularly in the sector, and I think it's, one of the things that draws us and keeps us here is that like we care about the
Yeah,
outcomes, right? We
yeah.
care that the organizations that we work with at New get the services that they're depending upon or, the guidance that they need to make sure that the folks in our communities are taken care of every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it does, while we aim to, yes, hold that line, um, it is it is much more gray. I think the longer that you kind of like spend time in it and identify with, the work and the communities that you're serving. Um, and like, I want y'all to know my family. You know what I'm saying? I want y'all to like every meeting at New, we start with a human check-in and we're asking each other like, how you doing? How are you coming into space? Like, what is your
Yeah.
reality right now? And the number of times that we, hear about each other's family members and pets,
Mm-hmm.
our kids, our friends, our close friends, our neighbors, and the ways that our personal and professional lives intersect. Um, that also keeps me here, knowing that I don't like, yeah, I want to clock out at some point every day so that I
Right,
can
right.
dedicate my
Yeah.
time and energy to those folks. But I also don't want to have to put them in a bucket that they don't get seen
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
spoken about here. Um, and vice versa. I want my kids to grow up with pride, knowing, like where their daddy works,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm,
get to know the folks that have meant so much to me in my time
mhm,
in New.
mhm.
Um, the many aunties and uncles that they have that are really in my life because of New. I want
Yeah,
them to have deep relationships there as well. Um, so that I think is also part of the legacy, right? Because we weren't, I mean, yes, New has always been, you know, a welcoming place for me. But I know that
mhm,
that's been a journey. And for somebody who's been there at 17 years, the
yeah,
culture that you've created is not necessarily the one that you came into,
yeah,
albeit that all of those folks have been part of the journey of making
yeah,
us better and better. And I
yeah,
hope to do, my own part in that as well.
yeah. Um, Thank you for naming others. And I do want to say, when I started in 2008, there was a Southeast Indian man who was the CEO. My boss was an out lesbian woman. There were folks, I was the youngest person, but there were folks who had chosen to devote the second half or the final parts of their career to the organization. They were also activists, organizers, entrepreneurs. The woman who brought me into New was my childhood babysitter. Um, so there is in the DNA in the bones of this organization, I think it's a pretty special place. And so I always took that real serious, and I expect the same of you that we're building on the shoulders of folks. We don't align with everybody who's ever been belonged to New, but folks like Paul Saginaw were working. Paul is a co-founder at Zingerman's, one of the nation's, preeminent uh, community of businesses that has a similar kind of ethos and set of shared values. I mean, Paul was here when they were building the building. Yesterday, Tom Porter, who is a his family has a foundation and he's investing in the environment and in climate justice, remembers when our building was a junkyard and here he was in our, in one of our conference rooms. So there's that. But there's something unique that you brought that I hope will persist. And you just made me think about it. To hear you laugh, I heard it today when I walked in the office. I can hear you laugh before I even make it in the room. It's such joy, and you have brought fun and joy to New. And I can't take any credit for that. It's not my gifting.
Mm,
I mean, I have many, but that's not my gifting. Love, warmth, care, those are my gifts. I know that, and I know that that's part of. But not you alone, but you ushered in a season of joy and fun. And when I see you and others on our team connecting in all the ways you said, with one another's families, and y'all are talking about music and books and concerts and that sort of thing, that it wasn't the same before you got
mm,
here, Will. I think that's again another really special quality that you have. And when I think about the life cycle that New is in, right, and I want to make this point because I think it's important for folks that are watching, you know the tendency is that we want that, big personality, fundraiser, visionary, leader that many of us have been socialized to think of, that archetype that you think of when we were planning succession, which for me was something I thought about when I got into the role. So I want to encourage you to think about
mhm,
this too. I wanted to be clear about a life cycle because of some of the other points that I've made, that sometimes leaders get into these roles and they stay. And while that steadiness of their presence can be helpful, particularly in difficult times, as was the case during COVID, right? I would not have left during COVID. There's a way that I think you can stay too long, and then the organization kind of starts to take on the persona of that leader. And I definitely have started to feel that, Will, that, people associate New with me. when there are, nearly 20 folks on our team. And that comes from, sitting in the seat for a while. And it is what earned me all those, that kind of reputational piece that you alluded to. But I believe it has consequences that can be perilous for an organization. So what I looked at and what I encourage people to think about is, where is new in its life cycle? So you have been my partner in creativity for a long time, and worked closely with me. So, I came to you in, was it 2020, and was like, I think we got to look at our mission, right? And
Mhm.
and interrogate our why. Why do we exist? And your peer at the time, Carrie Hammerman, who was my number two, I said to her, while it's quiet, because we'd all everything had gotten shut down, um, I need you to demonstrate for me the right we have to be here. Like, what is our impact, in other words? And so while you were working on branding and mission and positioning, she was working on evaluation. And that was important to me because of the role that intermediaries, place-based intermediaries like New play, and our history of kind of being the fixer-uppers of nonprofits, right? Like, they're broken and we need to fix them. So um, during that time of refining our mission, we also started to think about things like our theory of change and our vision. And we wrote together, our entire staff. I drafted, and then you and other leaders on the team, and ultimately our full staff and our board wrote a 10-year vision and got a chance to put an imprint on the long-term vision of the organization. And the reason why you've been here and matriculated in leadership as quickly as you have, some of which I already mentioned, your natural attributes, but you are a systems thinker. You have the capacity to take complex things and break them down into manageable systems and processes, and then to implement those, right? And to put strategy around it. And that is what a nearly 35-year-old organization needs. Now, this life cycle thing ebbs and flows. So you might find, Lord knows with everything that's happening in the world, you might find 3 or 4 years from now, this thing ain't relevant. But I think it is. I think where we're going, with an increased emphasis on being a justice centered, activist and type of intermediary that centers the communities and people who are most impacted by inequity and marginalization in this community, in our work, I think that's the move. And I think that we have put a vision, and you have stewarded a strategic plan and broadly organizational strategies and financial strategies that really position you to get to that 10-year vision.
I mean, that's my hope, right? I'm definitely grateful to have earned your trust and faith over the past 7 years, that I'll be able to continue that. Um, and I humbly agree. This is one of the things that I've kind of brought to every position and every place that I've worked is a blend of creativity and pragmatism.
Mm-hmm,
I think I'm fortunate to be a middle brain kind of person.
mm-hmm,
And um, yeah, I certainly plan to continue to you know, infuse my own brand of fun and joy into the work because one of our core values is liberation, right? And
mm-hmm.
you were one of the people who's helped us get to that, and so it means we have to embody the future that we want to see, and that
That's
is
it.
one where rest and joy
Mm-hmm.
and love come through in everything that we're doing and not
That's
just
right.
get, oh, you can rest when you're, you know, old and dead or
Right,
right
right.
like
Retired. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
exactly right.
yeah.
Save the laughter for your days off, pal. That's
Mm-hmm,
not who we want to be. um so I'm excited to continue to carry forward, and again, we'll adapt and we will
mm-hmm,
um, change and grow and learn from, not only the work that we are doing in our own experiments and efforts, but also from the folks that are doing similar things and different things too,
Mm-hmm.
around the country. One of my favorite um, jazz musicians once said, like, I have hobbies other than music because if this is all I did, then the music would be boring, right? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think it's beautiful that we can draw inspiration from folks that are not in the nonprofit sector, from the
Yeah.
artists and activists, from, um,
Yeah.
even folks um, that are like doing the work on the microcosmic level of, what are they learning in the child care centers that we can apply to the
Yeah.
ways that we show up and take care of people, at work. So yeah,
You
I'm
really are
very,
a humanist, and I think that that is important as well. And I think this creativity and pragmatism piece that you uplifted just briefly, Will, it made me think about um, how important that is in organizational design, right? Is not getting stuck and wedded to this is the way we've always done it.
yeah.
And I saw, you had another example of that, and I think this is when I really knew, like, yeah, you're the one. So let me put some benchmarks in. So I started to think about what's my exit strategy when I moved into the role. I was 60 days on the job, before COVID hits, right? There is no playbook. And I told our colleague Jess today that, uh, you know, that not having a playbook was probably the best thing that could have happened to me. And it's what I want to remind you of is just stay true to Will. Don't try to be anybody but Will. And why that's important is because there's a way in which this culture we've been socialized into, the norms and mores, this is a country that never has lived into its espoused values, right? We're not, I'm unwilling to have that happen at New. And the more I could just be who I am authentically, accept my shortcomings, but really lean into my zone of genius, the more I think that resonated and reverberated with others in the organization. And so when the pandemic happened, all I really had was what I knew about executive leadership, and that had come from my grandmothers and my mother and the community. It wasn't it wasn't even really from Mike, because Mike had come up a whole different way, right? So it wasn't like I could, like you won't be able to grab Yodit off the shelf and put that mask on. I couldn't do that. So I want to just encourage you to be you, because doing that, because the personal is political, doing that
Right.
transformed New. And I also want to remind you that everything you need to know is inside of you, um, and that it's okay to not know and to say that. And that hasn't always felt that way for a
Hmm.
lot of leaders. And in fact, in my coaching work, that's probably the thing I hear more often than not is how lonely leadership can be, especially executive leadership. You will stay up at night. Some things will keep you up at night because you care so much. Um, and, I'm thinking back on when I went out on sabbatical in 2023. Thank you, McGregor Fund and Miller Sabbatical. It was the first time ever in my adult life that I'd been paid not to work. I didn't even know how to act, Will. And it was the first time New had had an emergency succession plan. And I use that, and it's really important for you to think about where are those openings that allow you to make really transformational change. So the sector was talking about shared and distributed leadership. We were thinking about it. It was part of our strategic plan. So we practiced having co-directors. And because we have been talking about rest and how we institutionalize it, when I got back from that first leg, the person who we thought would possibly move into this role One was like, no, that's not what I want to do. I actually don't want to be a CEO. And also, I think I'm getting to the point where I like my life cycle at New, that's Carrie Hammerman, is wrapping up. And at about the same time, Linda Tam, who had only been with us a few years, but really had a deep longing to return to her homeland of Australia. Two powerful women, and we have a blog of the three of us. If anybody, you
Mm-hmm.
can find it on our YouTube channel. Linda said too, I think I want to go in a different direction. And as hard as that was, Will, um, I marked it as a sign of success that folks could say what they needed and that we could support them in getting there. And we did. And it was a whole nother like 9 months or a year before either of them left, which was last summer.
Mm-hmm.
But they did end up leaving around the same time. Um, you haven't said this yet, but you also had a couple, memorable life changes while you've been at New. I'm gonna let you talk
Mm-hmm.
about that. But by the time I get back, and with the two of them, there was unanimous consent from them and support for you to be my successor. And so for the better part of a year and a half, that's what we've been working towards. I feel like
Yeah.
I've been talking a lot, but I also do want to talk about how hard this last year has been.
Come on.
Maybe you could talk about
I
that.
mean, look, and we have 2 minutes left because I'm mindful that you have to get. So here's my thing, folks. If you want to hear more from Yodit and I, please join us for Passing the Torch, the event. We're going to have a celebration of Yodit's amazing 17-year career here at New, and I'll say a couple of remarks too about what you can hopefully expect in the years to come. So join us for that on June 20th. The links are attached to this blog. They're in the newsletter, all the places you can find them. Um, the last thing that I'll say before we wrap here, because I know you have a hard stop. I was literally just listening to an NPR interview on the way home, on our way to come record this. And the person was talking about um, how they have kind of like a plan for themselves, right? Their own, yeah, I know what the end of this chapter in my career is going to look like. Um, and what a beautiful thing it is to be able to forecast that, come to the end of it, look back and to say, the work, yeah, I've done the things that I needed to do.
Yeah.
And I've done them well. And I hope that you, as you are kind of wrapping up this chapter, um, are able to feel like you've done the things that you meant to do here and that you did them well. Because that's certainly the impression that you're leaving for me.
When I look at you and the other, amazing folks on the team, people I really do deeply respect and regard, I am leaving with a deep sense of satisfaction, gratitude, and I my only ask is that my um, my life be a testament to the ancestors that made way for me and you. I feel myself getting a little emotional because you and I are their answered prayers. Will
Mm-hmm.
they are. So, folks, I'm going to see if I can cajole Will into doing a part two, but there are four takeaways I want you to have. One, if you are thinking about passing the torch, give yourself some space. For us, it was about a 2 to 3 year process. And I encourage you to talk about it informally with board and staff, and then to really put a formal process in place, which Will and I
Yeah, we've had
did,
a whole plan. Yeah.
yeah, about 10 months ago. Identifying that successor, talking with them, and identifying where, if there are growth opportunities, because there always are,
Um,
um, identifying those. We did an internal survey so that Will was really getting 360 feedback from both board and staff. We call them our mission circle and our general circle. And then funding the development opportunity. So investing in your leaders. And then documenting and sharing that transition plan, which part of what we're trying to do now is share that with other folks so that we can continue in one of the elements of our theory of change, which is to influence the field towards a more just and thriving and loving sector, and prepare to be a bit uncomfortable. And as we've been talking about, think about those term limits, even if they're informal, think about your exit strategy and communicate that and prepare it And think what that helps us to move away from is that single leader paradigm, but it can also really help to regulate teams. So folks have known, informally that I would be moving away for the last couple of years. And the final thing I want to say is don't make your team do what Will had to do, which was ask me a year ago, are you leaving? And that was only because I'd been on sabbatical and there was a lot of flux happening,
Yeah,
but communicate often and early with the folks that you're thinking about or the person that you're thinking about moving into the role. So, Will, I'm looking forward to celebrating on the 20th. I told Jess
absolutely.
today, I'm not trying to do that ugly cry no more. And she was like, oh, yeah, throw that out the window. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
My friend,
okay.
love you.
Love you.
I'm
Thanks,
really
y'all.
happy for you, and I
Thank
cannot
you.
wait to see what the future looks like for you.
Yeah,
Thank you for saying yes.
thank you for asking me. And thank you all for the support,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so
you and
much. It
you.
has been an amazing 17 years, and I'll continue donating to New. I hope you all will too. And I will be around until early 2026 supporting my guy here. Um, Contribute, support, and help spread the word about what we're up to. Thanks so much.
Thanks, y'all.
Take care.